I've stepped into a lot, a lot of questionable things in my life. Mud, mystery juice at Taco Bell, what I once even thought was a cinnamon roll. It was actually a cinnamon roll, but I ate it and got food poisoning. But nothing, I mean nothing, will ever compare to what I stepped in that afternoon. Now, for some context, I'm a pretty fit person. I mean, look at me. So I was outside one day, dating my stepson, really romanticizing my life like I was some sort of wellness influencer. When all of a sudden, I stepped into something mushy. Now, this wasn't a normal mush. It felt warm, cozy even, like stepping into one of those heated blankets they sell at IKEA. So I weirdly leaned in and I squished deeper. And that's when the smell hit me. And oh my goodness, did it hit. I had stepped, no, planted myself in raw, hot sewage right there in my yard. I don't think I've ever ran that fast in my life. I immediately burned my shoes and I scrubbed not only my body, but the essence of my soul, like my life depended on it. Because honestly, it did. But here's the thing. For millions of Americans, that smell, that filth, that reality is far too common. Because across the US, entire communities are living in what can only be described by environmental activist Catherine Coleman Flowers as America's dirtiest secret. And no, we're not talking about accidentally clogging the Taco Bell toilet again, which I know we've all done. We're talking about failing infrastructure, government neglect, and an environmental crisis so widespread, so dangerous, and so deadly that is turning littered communities into wastelands. So today, let's trace how America became a first world nation with a third world sanitation system by first understanding the effects and failures that this crisis causes, then breaking down how systemic inequality and privatization keep it festering, before finally understanding what people are doing to wipe it away. Because, as the United Nations reported on March 12, 2010, access to clean water and sanitation should be a human right. Yet millions of Americans are living without it. And as former environmental administrator Gene McCarthy states, this is a silent public health crisis that no one seems to know a thing about. So let's start at the source. Literally. When I say sewage system, I'm talking about the invisible infrastructure that moves human waste from your toilet seat to a treatment plant or septic tank. The reality is that these systems aren't quite working right, and we are living with the crap. Literally. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably don't think too much about taking a number 2. I mean, why would you? That 8-pound dump you drop at Taco Bell, you probably assume it gets whisked away by some high-tech sewage system, never to be seen or smelled again. But as the Environmental Protection Agency notes, the reality is a lot messier than we might think. The EPA explains that roughly 1 in 5 Americans, about 66 million people, rely on septic tanks or other non-centralized sewage systems to handle their waste. And here's the kicker. About half of those systems are failing or poorly maintained. Even if you do have a functioning sewage system, raw sewage can take a detour, leaking into lakes, seeping into backyards, or even bubbling up into buildings. Ever wonder why the floor at Taco Bell always feels sticky? Yeah, that's not spilled sauce. This sewage, it doesn't come alone. It brings diseases with it, like cholera, E. coli, and Coop's favorite, hookworm, a disease that literally feeds on your blood. Take Lowndes County, Alabama, where a third of residents have hookworm. Why? Because when their sewage systems fail, The hookworm in that waste gets up into their yards, the same yards that kids play in, adults walk through, and pets track inside. The hookworm in that waste gets in through their feet, where it climbs up their body, feeding on their intestines and blood. And this isn't just causing a health hazard in Lowndes County, Alabama, but it's causing a health hazard nationwide. Tommy Rettig, a 44-year-old homeless man, died from necrotizing fasciitis. Tommy lived on a traffic island with no access to clean water or sanitation. His story is a warning of what happens when we treat sanitation like a privilege instead of a human right. But here's the thing. Tommy's story isn't some freak accident. It's a result of a system that was meant to oppress the low income and marginalized. To truly understand how America ended up drowning in its own filth, we have to dig deeper into the past, the late for today's modern day crisis and waste. One woman's fight against America's dirty little secret. Environmental activist Catherine Coleman Flowers comes up with a shocking discovery. She finds out that when sewage systems fail, it's often communities of color that are left behind, literally living with the waste. And the question polluting my head is, how do we let it get this bad? Like so many American issues, this one traces back to systemic racism and inequality. After slavery ended, Black families were technically free, but white homeowners want to keep their associations pure. So white neighborhoods, lawmakers, and local governments created exclusionary tactics to keep these communities undesirable. This included things like systemic inequality, or better said, exclusionary tactics. Things like redlining, which purposely separated white and Black communities. It also included things like racial zoning laws, which purposely removed funding from low-income and Black communities. As a result, this didn't just limit where they could live, it limited what they could access. These communities were left with no investments. They didn't get sewer linings or drainage systems or paved roads. Instead, they got broken systems in a country that was too lazy to fix it. Even when laws like the New Deal promised sanitation upgrades, they purposely skipped over these communities, either because they're too poor to be worth it, or simply not worth their time. And this brings us to today, where these same communities are paying the price, not just from systemic inequality, but also from privatization. In cities like San Francisco, even something as simple as pooping has a price tag. Let me explain. Due to a lack of public restrooms, people are being forced to poop in businesses, and these businesses know that. And they're making a price tag, and they're making money off it. Such as my used to be favorite restaurant, Starbucks, which is forcing people in San Francisco to pay before they're allowed to use the restroom, turning basic human needs into a transaction. Unsurprisingly, it's the homeless population that suffers the most. Without consistent access to free public facilities, many are left with no choice but to relieve themselves on the streets. The same streets that families, passerbys, and everyday people go about their day. America's poop crisis isn't the result of one issue. It's the result of multiple. But when that snow became too big to ignore, people stood up, and they started creating work of change. Cue Stop the Poop Group. Established in 2019, this coalition of everyday Americans were frankly fed up with America's food crisis, and they're protesting. And they were protesting for better sewage infrastructure and government policies across the nation. Heck, change is also brewing online. Apps like Snapchat allow users to report human waste in streets and are urging politicians to listen to their citizens on sanitation concerns. And it actually turns out like our politicians are listening. In 2019, after the grassroots group Stop the Poop rally, San Francisco senators took their concerns to Washington, D.C., where they helped pass Joe Biden's $1 trillion infrastructure bill to help cities like theirs. Overall, what became something I stepped in soon became something I couldn't unsee. And while I got to walk away, for millions of Americans, they don't. For them, there's no clean fix, no pair of shoes, just broken systems in a country that too often looks the other way. But by advocating and spreading awareness about this issue, we can help flush this stinky villain away. Not by flushing it away, by putting on our fancy gloves and removing it from the root.